Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and welcome to another mod with me. So today we are going to be trimming and edging my Wheel of the Year Tarot. Now this is a quite lovely low Scarabeo deck, but as you can see here, it is a little bit older deck and it does still have all of the languages all the way around the border. So the titles in multiple languages, we do have the white borders on it. And then we also have this strange rainbow thing that's going on along both sides of the white borders on both sides of the deck. I'm not really sure what the purpose of that is, but it's a little bit distracting, just everything going on in this deck. So this is a deck that I've seen around for a while. It's an older deck. More recently, I saw it on Hazel Jane Tarot's channel. I absolutely love this Three of Swords. This is one of the cards that kind of clinched the deck for me because it does depart a little bit from the Waite-Smith tradition, although this is definitely a Waite-Smith deck. One of the things that I really love about this deck is it does follow the Wheel of the Year or the turns of the season. So each suit has its own season, and we also have seasonal energy represented in the majors. So I really love that idea of this seasonal deck, although sometimes the artwork doesn't quite hit the mark for me, but overall I think it is quite a lovely deck and I do really like that seasonal energy. However, all of this that's going on in the borders, it just kind of never really appealed to me as I saw it in its original form. I did kind of have a little bit of a renewed interest in it after seeing Hazel Jane Tarot work with it, and she had talked about what a wonderful reader it was. And so I was kind of leaning more towards it. It ended up back in my Amazon shopping cart again. And then I saw a video by Hearth Witch where she was talking about trimming decks, which really didn't have anything to do with this deck in particular, other than she showed her trim version of this deck. And that's when I realized I need this deck and I just need to trim it, because taking all of that excess off, taking off the white borders, the colored borders, I don't know if you can see them, but there is a blue border. Each of the different suits have different colors. So we have this yellow border in the pentacles, this blue in the cups, we have the purple in the majors. Some of them are fine because some of them relate. However, yellow is not a color I associate with pentacles. That's actually the color I associate with swords. And in this deck, green is associated with swords. So those two are kind of swapped for me. So there is that as well. The color associations don't quite match up with what I see. And it is very apparent in the number and also that micro border. The wands are also kind of an orangey color, not so much a red as I would see them, but again, just little things there that just didn't quite hit the mark for me. Then when I saw this deck on Hearth Witch's channel and she had trimmed it, then that's when it clicked and I was like, okay, I just need to go ahead and get this deck. I need to give it a try, but before I can actually really bring myself to work with it, I am going to have to remove all of that excess busyness that is going on around the outside of the cards. With this rainbow thing, the white border, the inner colored border, we have titles here, 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 and here, multiple titles at the top, the big giant number. It is just far too much and it's super distracting, and I think it really does take away from the artwork in this deck, because when you see it removed of all of that, it is quite stunning. So that is what we are going to do today, is go ahead and trim my copy of the Wheel of the Year Tarot. So let's go ahead and get started. So as per usual with my modifications, let's real quick talk about my tools. I do have a complete video on all the tools that I use, but just to go over real quick, I have my Fiskars trimmer, I have my triangle ruler, which I will use to create a guide, my washi tape to hold that down. I will have a corner rounder for when we're done trimming the deck down, and my ruler to help me see where the blade's actually going to come down. So before we jump into chopping the borders off this deck, one of the things that I always like to do before I trim a deck is kind of go through and look for a couple key things. One of the things that I'm looking for is whatever would be the most challenging card. In this particular deck and in this particular layout, all of the stuff that I want to cut off is in this border area and exists on the other side of this colored inner border. So as long as I'm making sure that I am just cutting to the inside of that inner border, I'm going to be able to remove everything that I want to remove, and nothing is going to get cut off in between because all the text exists in the border area. So I'm going to be able to take this down to just the artwork, and that should work beautifully because there's nothing that really impedes in that art area. Just a few things that I might want to be mindful of is things where kind of main focal points of the images get kind of close to the border. But I've been through this deck a couple of times now, and I think that everything should be good. There's nothing that I feel like I'm going to really chop off anything important. You can see here with this little pentacle here, it is really close to that yellow border. And so I'm just gonna have to be really mindful of trying not to cut in too much of that. I know I'm not gonna end up cutting the whole thing off because I'm definitely not cutting down any more than I need to because this is already quite a small deck. It is your traditional low Scarabeo size, and it is on their lovely older cardstock, which I do actually quite like. So that's kind of one of the first things that I do is just kind of go through and see if there's anything that might present a challenge when I'm trimming and what I'm planning on doing in terms of my trimming. The other thing that I do like to take into consideration, although it's not a huge deal for me, but it is important to note that with this particular deck, because I'm going to be taking off the title areas on the top and bottom, I am going to be, for one, cutting off this orange border altogether. And in the top here, hopefully you'll be able to see when I cut into that, I'm going to end up losing a little bit of these signs up here, which I think is going to be okay for me. And I'm going to be losing some down here at the bottom. I'm okay with that because I'm going to be retaining the main 4 seasonal energies and the wheel in the center. I'm good with that, but it is something that you do definitely need to keep in mind if the backs and maintaining the backs and making the backs look nice are important to you. So other than that, I think this should be a pretty straightforward trim. So now I just kind of need to decide where I want to start. And for this deck, because I'm cutting off all of the sides and it doesn't really matter which way I go first, I think we'll just go ahead and start with one of the sides maybe. Do like to kind of look, this is a smaller card, so I do like to kind of look and see, is it going to fit on my board? And if not, are there any sides that I can take off first that would make that easier? So if this were an extra large card, maybe I might want to take off the tops first because that's the largest chunk that I'm going to be taking off. But since this card is smaller than 5 inches, it fits on my board either way. So it's not really a huge consideration. So basically what I'm going to do is figure out where I want to cut, and I'm going to make sure that I cut each of the tops off first. I'm going to set a guide using this little triangle ruler just to make the process go a lot quicker and to ensure that I'm cutting each card at the same measurement every time. It just makes it go a little bit faster and ensures that I'm getting as straight of a cut as humanly possible. And I do always say humanly possible because we are still cutting by hand here, so it's not going to be perfect. But the straighter you can get your cut, the more even you get your cards, the better it is going to shuffle in the long run. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. And this is not a great card to start with because that inner border is blue and the top is blue. So that might make it a little more difficult for me to see, but we're gonna go ahead and roll with it because I do have that pink tree that I can kind of look at too to make sure that I am getting off all of that inner blue border. So I think I'm gonna want it right about there. And so I'm gonna tape my card down there, and then I'm going to use my ruler here, my corner ruler here, to just line it up. And basically what I'm doing is creating a cradle. Then I'm going to tape this down, and I'm always careful not to put my tape in the way of my card. So we'll just tape it down right about there. I do like to make sure that I do have my ruler in here straight. Taping it down also helps keep it from moving around. These are fairly thin cards, so I also want to make sure that when I slide the cards in here, I'm not going under the ruler. And before I make a cut, I am just going to check a couple of these just to make sure it's looking good on a variety of different cards and suits, some majors, some minors. Just always like to give it a double check. We can also give it a double check here and see what I'm going to be cutting off the top. So if you can see that, I'm going to be cutting off a good portion. So about that much of the top is going to go. This is going to be a very small pocket-sized deck by the time I'm done, but I'm okay with that because I think it'll be cute that way and always easier for me to work with the smaller the deck is. So I'm just going to slide my card in here. The other thing that I'm doing is making sure I'm keeping several points of contact down on the card to make sure that it is not shifting around as my blade pushes its way through the card. It is cutting it, yes, but it is also kind of pushing its way through the card. And so I like to hold that down so that it's not shifting my card around and I'm not getting an uneven cut. So there is our first cut, which I think looks really nice. Go ahead and just do a couple more. This is a nice flexible thin cardstock, so it's going through it quite nicely. So I think that is looking pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and basically just repeat this process. Let's make sure they are straight. Yep, they look nice and straight and all even. So I'm gonna go ahead and just repeat this process. I'm gonna cut all the tops off, all 78 cards first. Then I am going to probably flip the deck around. I'll reset my measurements, cut the bottoms off, and basically repeat that same process for each of the sides. It's real important, I think, to trim each side at a time using the same measurements. That is what gets it really, really straight. If I were to come in here and just cut each side on this one card, it's not going to be exactly the same, even if I'm following the lines on this card, because the printing does vary and it shifts from card to card. Plus, when you're eyeballing it, it's just a little bit harder to get it perfectly straight or as perfectly straight as humanly possible. So if you'd like a full in-depth tutorial on how to trim a deck, I do have a deck mod trimming tutorial on my channel. I will leave that linked for you in the description box below. So I'm going to go ahead and finish trimming off all of the edges of this deck, and then we will check back in and see what it looks like. So I have finished trimming this entire little deck, and you can see here that it is quite small and pocket sized now. It is really cute. I did end up taking off quite a bit of the symbols on the top. I'm okay with that. And I did just trim a little bit of the symbols on the bottom there. And I think it came out really wonderful though. It is nice and straight, which we always get or usually get when we use those measurements. And look at these cards now. They just really open up without those borders on there and all that weird rainbow thing we had going on and all the different languages. They are just so much more big and bright and beautiful now. And I mean big in terms of the energy of the artwork, obviously not in terms of its size, because now this is quite a small little deck. And you can see that's the original size of the deck. So you can see I took off quite a bit here. So they are quite a bit smaller now, which I actually really like because now they're kind of like perfect pocket size. They fit really nicely in my hand, and I think they just look absolutely stunning like this. So I did end up using the medium size corner rounder on this deck. I tried the small one first. Let me just clip that so you can see it. That gives a really, really square edge. And I wanted to soften the deck up a little bit. The super squared edges just felt a little too harsh for this artwork and for this deck. So I used the medium, which rounded it up quite a bit more and gave it a really nice, softer feel. If I really wanted to round it even more and give it an even softer vibe, I could have used that large. And you can see that would have rounded it quite a bit. That has taken off quite a bit more of those corners, and that would have given it a really nice, soft, round feel. However, I think the medium is a good choice for this deck because it softens it up, but it doesn't make it too rounded to look like the corners are, you know, overly rounded for the size of the deck because it is quite small now. So now at this point, I am ready to go ahead and edge the deck. You could just totally leave it like this, of course, because this is just that raw edge, similar to what it had before I trimmed it, because this deck wasn't gilded or anything. We just had the plain edges, but I think edging the deck really finishes it off quite nicely. So I'm excited to put some color on there and finish it off. Now I went back and forth about what color I wanted to do. As you can see here from this title card that I was playing with, it did have orange borders on it, but I didn't feel like the bright orange really fit the back of the deck or really fit kind of the energy of the card. I've decided to go with something that is a bit more neutral and natural, and I was looking at some of the different browns that I have in my collection. These ones all primarily Crayola. Most of them are either quite grooved or used up. But I do have a small selection of Tombows now that I'm using on my decks. I do keep these separate from my journal markers because I don't want to mix those up, because when I edge a deck with a marker, it does get really grooved. And you can see here what that ends up looking like in this particular line that I made with one of my markers. That's all those grooves in there that the card, running the marker along the card, has run into the marker itself. So let's just flip that over. And I thought that was a nice match to this softer tan color here on the wheel. And I thought that would be a good choice just to have a really nice neutral and also kind of natural looking color to it. So I'm going to go ahead and edge the deck in that color. Now, a couple of things. I am fairly new to working with Tombows. The last experience that I had was edging my Dragon Fae Oracle, which had a totally different cardstock than this does. That was a much thicker matte cardstock with a totally different finish on it. So I am curious to see how this more kind of traditional, a little bit more cardboardy type, it's not really cardboard, but it's a cardboard type deck, how that's going to take the edging and how that's going to work with this particular marker. So I have saved several of these these are just the titles that I cut off, and I've saved several of these so that I can do some testing on it to see how the color is going to apply and if it's going to run or bleed or come off in any way, shape, or form on the card fronts. I'm most concerned with the fronts, but I really don't want it to micro edge the back either, because as you've probably heard me say a million times before, that really irritates me when I trim a deck and then the marker I use or any edging medium I use puts a border back onto it. Nothing frustrates me more than that. So it's looking like so far this is going on this cardstock really nicely. So all I'm basically going to do is run this marker along the edge of my deck, and I'm going to essentially color the edges. I am always keeping the card back to me. That way, in case I accidentally run off the card, I run onto the back and not the front. That also does mean that any microbleeding that there may be would be on the back rather than the front, but I do always kind of like to give them a little wipe just to be sure, but I'm not really seeing any kind of bleed or anything. I have found that with the Tombows, if I just kind of wipe over the front with my little paper towel like that, it does kind of wipe off any microbleeding that I might have gotten on the front. So that's pretty much the whole process. It is pretty quick and easy, you know, as quick and easy as it is to color 78 cards. I will be here for a little bit. So I have edged about half the deck, and look how pretty they look. I just thought I'd show you before I sit here and scoop them all up together, but look at them all borderless. They look so lovely like this. Okay, so here is the half that I've edged. And I do actually quite like that color. I think it looks really nice. You know, it's fairly close to the wheel. It's close enough. I'm happy with that. And it does have a definite kind of earthy, more natural look to it, which is what I was really after. So you can see that's how it looks. So here's compared to Maybe I didn't quite do half. I think I did a little less than half, but you can see a huge difference when I put it next to the unedged cards. Like, it just really, really finishes it off beautifully to have that edging on there. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with the way it's coming out. I might see about maybe doing some highlights in here. We'll see. I'm gonna go ahead and finish getting it edged first, and then we'll see what I think when it's all done. Okay, so I have finished edging the entire deck, and I do quite like the color that it came out. It is still a little bit darker than what I was hoping for, but I think it does work quite well. I am just feeling like I need to add that little like pop of light in there. I don't know why I feel that way, I just do. So I thought I would get into my stamps and see what I have. Let's pull that out because that's kind of what I'm trying to mimic, and we'll see if I can actually achieve that. So let's just go full on because we're in it now. I done it. I done it now. Just trying to kind of hold that tight enough. So now I'm using the copper and I'm picking up more of the red color that's in the center of the wheel, which is totally fine. We really want to keep the deck as straight and tight as possible. Kind of like the look of that. So now that I've done that, I do need to kind of go around each card individually and just make sure that any bleed that went through the cards, in between the cards, I get off because the Brilliance stamps do definitely bleed. This one here, I don't know if you can see it, but I got like a full-on streak of it across the front. But you can see it wipes right off as long as I don't leave it to set there too terribly long. Okay, so I have finished trimming and edging the Wheel of the Year Tarot. I actually did let this set overnight and dry, although it really didn't need to. It's just that I finished trimming it up, or edging it actually, kind of late in the evening. So I went ahead and just let it set overnight. And I do really love the way the edging came out. So it has this nice, really kind of natural looking brown color, and then I've added layers of Brilliance ink over the top of it. So here on the top and bottom, I've added just the Brilliance in the Cosmic Copper. And then on the sides, I did end up putting some of the Brilliance Gold in the center and just kind of working it into the copper color. So what I did with this was I laid down a layer of the Tombow in the 977, and that gave me my base color of this nice brown. Then I went back over it with the Cosmic Copper and just brushed it on or rubbed it on the top, and then of course wipe the excess off because it does smush in between the cards. Maybe if I held them a little bit tighter, I still feel like it would because it's quite a wet ink. So I added that to both of the sides, and I did also add it to the top as well. And then what I did was I went back with the Brilliance in the gold, which I don't have because I already put away. But in the gold color, I went back with that and just added a little bit of that to the center on both of the sides here. And it just kind of gave it a little bit more of a yellowy shimmer in the center, which I think looks really pretty. Again, this is all extra. The main thing that I wanted to do was actually trim the cards down and get rid of all of that excess title work and the weird stripy things on the border and all of that. My goal was to match the wheel in the center, and I think I've managed to do that really well. I wanted it to kind of have the variegation in the color, so the wheel kind of looks a little bit, you know, a little bit like it's glowing, and that's what I really wanted on the back of the cards, and I think that I did a fairly good job getting pretty close to that, kind of mimicking that pattern there, and so I'm really thrilled with the way that that turned out. And so now let's take a look at the trimmed cards. So if you remember when we first started, they were quite a bit larger. So they were this size. This is the title card that comes with the deck. And you can see here that I've taken off I've taken off quite a bit, so they are quite a bit smaller, although I think they're a great size now. They fit in my hand just beautifully, so I'm pretty happy about that. And I think that removing all that excess border and title and design that was going on the borders, particularly, you know, those typical low scarabeo borders with all the multiple languages going on, it really does open the artwork up, and I think it's quite charming now. It just really allows the artwork to kind of be free and to breathe, as we say. It feels a bit more expansive, not so kind of closed in and restricted. Now I feel like these cards are kind of just open and full of energy, and it's just really beautiful. And I do really like a smaller deck because it's much easier for me to handle and hold. Now that I've trimmed it, let's go ahead and give it a shuffle. We'll see how that does. Generally, if you're using the kind of measurement and or guide system, you generally get a really nice trim that will allow you to still riffle shuffle your deck, provided I can see a corner I missed there and it's bugging me. There you are. Sorry, I'm gonna have to just take my marker and just kind of fix that real quick. It's just the teeny tiniest little tip of the corner that I missed there, but it is very white amidst all this beautiful brown. So you can see that it still riffle shuffles beautifully. Woo! It's a bit slippy because it is that low scarabeo cardstock. And the thing that I really love is now I can actually turn it this way and I can overhand it. But as you can see, it's a wonderful size. It's super cute. It's like pocket size now. Let's go ahead and put a few cards down on the table just so we can see what it looks like. And of course I can, you know, line them all up together and make a wonderful story. And this deck I think would work really well for those kind of story-centric readings because it does look like something that I think came out of a storybook. So there we have it, my completely trimmed version now of the Wheel of the Year Tarot. I will definitely need to make a bag for it now because it's not going to fit very well in the box. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.